All righty, we are live. All right, and this link in the chat here is in case you want to share with anybody. Oops, sorry, to anybody who wants to view us on YouTube. Of course, they're welcome to join us to the meeting. We have a good bit of capacity left, so we're able to do this. So good evening. I am Ria Jerem, N2RJ. I'm the division director for the Hudson division of the ARRL, and with that, I'm going to pass it over to Nomar to do the start. And he will introduce the program, and then I will be one of the guest speakers, but providing the Zoom capability for us so that we can, have this meeting. On to you, Nomar.
Okay, thank you very much, Ria, and good evening to everybody. Welcome to FLARC, the Fair Lawn Amateur Radio Club. My name is Nomar Vizcarrondo, NP4H. I am the president of the club, and also assistant director of the ARRL for the Hudson Division here in Northern New Jersey. Before we begin, a little bit about FLARC. We're a club with just a little over 160 paid members, which makes presumptively the largest club in the Garden State here in New Jersey. We're located about 10 miles west of the George Washington Bridge in Bergen County. It is a non-for-profit special service club sponsored since 1965 by the borough of Fair Lawn. We have an actual clubhouse with 5 operating positions, and we've upgraded our antenna systems and also our transceivers right before the lockdown came in May. The club, we have here monthly Zoom speaker programs on the 3rd Friday of each month. We hold nets on Mondays, Tuesdays, and Wednesdays during the evening. We have a growing number of special interest clubs and groups, I should say, to keep members involved during the shutdown. We welcome you to check into our W2 NPT repeater, and also you could do that via Echolink. It's accessible there. Our website, for those of you interested in checking us out, is fairlawnarc.org. Again, that's fairlawnarc.org. You could please sign up and join our mailing list, and be sure to download a copy of our highly acclaimed monthly newsletter, The Resonator. You won't be disappointed. You can also find our large collection of monthly speaker videos by checking out our YouTube channel, Fair Lawn Amateur Radio Club. And then, once you find it, please, you could go to our Facebook page, friend us there, like it, and we're also on Twitter. And that's basically it about us. And we will begin tonight's program. It's been a tradition of FLARC that our December speaker program has a representative of the ARRL to bring us up to date with what's going on at Newington and to answer questions of our members. Tonight, we are truly honored to have not one, but 2 of our ARRL dignitaries. Hopefully, you will find time to catch up with their bios when noting tonight's program. We have tonight our newly appointed CEO, David Minster, November Alpha 2 Alpha Alpha, who is from nearby Wayne, New Jersey, and also our Hudson Division Director, Ria Jerem, November 2 Romeo Juliet, from Sussex, New Jersey, who is also a FLARC member, and she's no stranger here to us, so we're glad to have her with us tonight as well. So there's a lot to talk about, and time is short, so let's get started. It's my pleasure again to introduce to you to Ria and David, and the program is yours. Good evening.
All right, good evening. Just want to make sure everybody's hearing me clearly. Nomar, are you hearing me okay?
5'9" plus 60.
All right, good. All right, good evening. I am no stranger to you all. I am Ria Jerem, N2RJ, and I am the director of the Hudson Division. And I'm also a member of FLARC, and I'm a member of other clubs, and I love DX apparently, but I also love everything else in ham radio. It's truly an honor to come to this club again and to have a great speaker. So I'll explain the format of this meeting. David is our new CEO, first of all, and I'd like to congratulate him on going through a grueling and arduous process. The process for CEO selection was no walk in the park, and David made it through, and I'm truly honored that he is the one that made it through. Little secret, I had a lot of discussion with David before he took the reins, and both in the interview room and outside of the interview room. And, I knew he had the right stuff. And more importantly, I really like that he aligns with a lot of my values and where the hobby and where the amateur radio service needs to go. So I'm going to ask him a few questions and he's going to answer. And then it'll be your turn to ask some questions that you may have, some burning questions. And if you have digital QST, I believe the January issue is out, and you might see a the editorial of his, and it's a lot of good stuff as to his vision for the league. So I'm very excited. All right. So with no further ado, David, welcome. Please introduce yourself.
Okay, I'm David, NA2AA. I've been in amateur radio since about 1977. I think somewhere around 1978, I went with WA2HDD, who is not far from the Fairlawn Club, living over in Glen Rock. Wound up going to a few Friday night meetings. And as I recall, it was the first time I ever saw slow scan television. But I saw something come through the chat before. I didn't want to get distracted and start typing off to the side, but I saw a quick note from Doug, KR2Q. And Doug and I were friends back then. He was my introduction to high-end contesting, and took me as a teenager up to see K2GL in Tuxedo Park. And I remember after we went through the guard station, I don't know if Doug remembers this, we were in his Porsche 924, and we had just come through, and he looked at me and he said, "You will never look at amateur radio the same again." And we went up to the top of this hill, beautiful Tudor home, and right next to the front door was a big Bertha with stacked 20-meter Yagis on it. I was like, this is unbelievable. And it was just one of, who knows, maybe 18 towers or something that was up. So in any event, I was active in high school at WA2UIB, which was the high school station at Ramapo High School in Franklin Lakes. Went on to Ohio State, and didn't have a lot of time to spend in the ham station, but Whiskey 8 Lima Tango. When I got out of university, I got into my degrees in computer engineering. I got into writing contest software, first on in the early part of college on an early Apple II. And by the time I got out of Ohio State, I was writing contesting software and wrote a CW keyer that I called the Jersey City keyer, as sort of a nod to the Kansas City keyer. But anyway, did contest software development. And I think it was the CQ Worldwide phone. No, CQ Worldwide CW, because it was right around Thanksgiving. In 1986, we didn't log because Buzz had not bought the computers, but we duped the entire contest and scored it within minutes of the end of the contest. So when we got on 38:30, we actually had a clean score. And people were pretty freaked out at the time that we had done that. My call sign comes as a nod to another Tuxedo Park alumnus, Gene Walsh, who was a bit of a contesting mentor to me. And I also contested with him down in South Jersey at N2RJ Mike's station, another really unbelievable station there just off the Jersey Shore. And so in any event, we were using N2AA up in Tuxedo Park, and I got NA2AA when they opened the vanity pool. And Gene called me up and said, "Are you completely out of your mind? Now, if we're both in the same contest, people are going to get confused and think they already worked us. You know, what a stupid thing to do." But anyway, we didn't have that problem because I didn't have the time for serious contesting. So he was safe. In any event, just a little more background. You know, there's pretty much no aspect to the hobby that I haven't met, that I haven't liked. That comes in terms of different ways of operating. So I'm a bit of a satellite fanatic. I love digital. I've checked. FT8 is not the death of amateur radio, by the way. So if you were scared about that, you can rest easy. I enjoy going down to Bonaire twice a year. We have a station down there on the north part of the island, up on top of the second highest peak on the island. And even though we've got I think relatively modest antennas for a contest station, these things are just flamethrowers. So we typically do very well in ARRL DX. And I'm pretty sure we usually win it. And we're competitive in CQ Worldwide. We try to get to the front of the pack for South America, and of course, trying to beat Morocco in CQ Worldwide is paramount to impossible. I think we did it once back maybe in 2012. But I do love going down to Bonaire. I do love contesting. You know, I guess to a certain extent, blame Doug KR2Q and Bob W50V because they've taken me into the multi-operator environment, and I just absolutely love the team aspect of contesting. So that's a bit of background.
All right, that's great because you answered my first question, which was your roots are deep in the Hudson Division. How can you describe a bit of your experiences and your formative years in amateur radio? And that was awesome. So next one is how do you see the role of the league itself today? Because you are now the CEO of the league, and is it different from the times past?
You know, one of I think the most important thing that the role that the league plays is we're basically the caretaker for the hobby. If you take a look at, and you know, you can argue the metaphor, but if you take a look at CB radio, you know, CB radio back in its day grew into a massive, massive hobby, right? So you could buy these things. I think you could buy CB radios at gas stations, and, you know, I think even J.C. Penney at one point was selling Royce CB radios. You know, CB radios were showing up in movies and in country music songs. It was ubiquitous, right? Everybody had one. But the thing about CB radio is there was no one to look after it as a hobby. There was no structure. There was no leadership. There was no advocacy with the FCC. And it's just really a hobby that just sort of imploded in on itself. When you look at the role the league plays, you know, we have a very, very long heritage, you know, going all the way back into had its roots in the beginning of the last century. And as we go into this second century for the league, you know, one of the things that it was actually the platform that I ran on for CEO is to take the league through a digital transformation. The league for a long time has sort of thought on the timeline of being a publisher, and the world of the internet and everything being available instantly and everywhere all the time is a radical change in paradigm. And so that's really where we're taking the league, is to try to take the league through the digital transformation. I think I said it in my editorial. We're not too late. The world has not passed us by. There's You know, even as I look tonight at everybody showing up on this Zoom conference, this is something, you know, probably 2 years ago, absolutely no one would anticipate doing, to go to a Fair Lawn Amateur Radio Club meeting. So leading that digital transformation for the league sort of over the next 10 years is going to be a critical role, not just for ARRL, but for the hobby more broadly.
All right, and so let's get off script a little bit. Not that there was a script, but you mentioned that tonight we see that we would not have envisioned this years ago. The reason Fair Lawn began having all these coffee talks on Zoom, and so I was, before I became a member of Fair Lawn, I actually was a presenter at one of their talks. I gave a talk on, obviously, software-defined radio, because that's my wheelhouse. And now they have talks on Zoom, which is great. But the reason we have Zoom talks is because we have a worldwide health crisis, pandemic, whatever you want to call it, known as coronavirus. Do you think that we would have been pushed in that direction absent of coronavirus, or do you think it's just something we would have naturally evolved to?
I don't think it would have evolved that way, because, you know, the part of amateur radio that I love and the part of contesting that I love is the community, is the fact that we're able to come together and be together as you know, friends and colleagues. And Zoom, although this is fantastic through a tough time, it allows us to stay in touch with each other. You know, I'm aware that there are groups of amateur radio operators that actually use this every morning just as a health check on each other to make sure that, you know, people are okay the next day. You know, I think absent the pandemic, we wouldn't be doing this. We'd all be in Fair Lawn right now. As I recall, I think Tom Gallagher took down a box of cookies or something from a bakery up here. So I would be down there with you in Fair Lawn. I'd have some baked goods and we'd be kicking back and enjoying the evening together, as opposed to doing it virtually.
And, you know, I'm not against in-person conferences. I love going, you know, to Crown Plaza. I think I'd met you in Crown Plaza. It was in some time ago at the one of the super suites, or was it before contest dinner? And, you know, that kind of camaraderie, you can't really replace that. But you're right. You know, I mean, in terms of like how we consume our content, it is really different. I mean, you know, I started back doing YouTube because I used to do a little bit of YouTube back then, and then I started back because I figured, you know, people are asking me so much questions online, technical topics, might as well share the knowledge. We have Alan, N2RJ. He has, I think, 130,000 subscribers now. And then you have, he's in the Zoom meeting too, by the way. Then you have Ham Radio Crash Course, who I understand you talked to about his things in ham radio. And by the way, Josh is now going to be doing Ham Nation. He's going to be hosting the Ham Nation show on his channel. So it's good. So I'm really pleased that the league is going to be doing that stuff. What I do and ask, though, is one of the questions I get from the from people. So let me back up a little bit. People ask me, they said, well, you know, why does the ARRL still print a magazine, and why can't we get a discount for going digital only? I know I voted on a discount for a digital only magazine. Do you see more members moving toward digital consumption, and what form do you think that'll take? You know, is it just going to be primarily video, or are they continuing to read like articles, magazines, and books?
I think that in the fullness of time, just as we have with our QSLing, you're going to see people move progressively more towards the digital consumption of our content. But I will tell you that members are very interested in getting their print copy of the magazine. And in fact, we also occasionally get requests from members who have fallen in love with on the air digitally. They will not give up their QST subscription, but they now want to get both magazines because they love on the air so much that they want it, they want that tactile feel. They want to be able to flip through the articles and the ads and so forth. And it's an experience for them. So
That's good. Before we jump into the league benefits, one question I asked you in the interview, maybe you can answer it for the public, is how do you get more people like me into the hobby?
you guys need to know, by the way, right? Rhea was so hard on me in these interviews. So she just asked the question like, hey, how do you do that? In there, she was like, look at me. I was like, holy God, what's going on over there? But in any event, the real question comes down, and you'll see it in my next column in terms of inclusion. This is a very broad issue with regards to the hobby. And it's not just about women. It's not just about people of color. We have inclusion problems where people go and get their new technician, and the local hams at their club or on the local repeater beat these guys up. And I get emails from these new hams saying like, what do? I got into the hobby. I don't know where to go because of whatever. We had one guy say, I got my license a year ago. My local club isn't making me feel welcome. And the other day, these two guys beat me up on the repeater. So I'm not going to be renewing my membership, and I'm going to drop out of the hobby.
I've heard that one before.
So I had him, reach out to his section manager, and the section manager stepped in and got this guy very, very active locally. And, he couldn't be happier. But when I look at inclusion, the way that we're doing it is we're sort of stratifying it at the league. One of the things that we've done in terms of youth, which is something I'm passionate about because I came into the hobby. I came into Fair Lawn Amateur Radio Club as a teenager. So we've recently hired on a contract basis a well-known YouTuber who is also an educator and works with kids. In fact, he has an elective course on amateur radio that he teaches in his school. And he works with donations from his channel to make sure that every kid that gets a license gets a Baofeng radio when they get their call sign. He's going to be reaching out and working with Sterling N2RJ, who is the youth coordinator for the IARU Region 2. And actually, I just got an email from Ward Silver, who's doing some stuff with Sterling. He wants to get involved. So there's this sort of groundswell of activity about, how we go out and how we approach youth. And at the same time, Bob, N2RJ, who's sitting next to me here, he's our product development leader, our head of product development at ARRL. He's working on a project with two students. They're from Florida, right? Two students from Florida, a brother and sister. They're now in college. They're both ARRL Foundation scholarship winners. They've built an FM transmitter kit. And so we've ordered a number of these that will be selling in kit form for a modest amount of money, that kids will be able to build these little FM transmitters as an introduction to radio, not ham radio, not give them a technician guide, an introduction to amateur radio, just to get them interested in the foundational, the basics of radio. And using either a small commercially available FM transmitter, or even there's an interesting way that you can convert a Raspberry Pi Zero into an FM transmitter with a piece of code. It's very low power, but it works. A group of kids that put these kits together are going to be able to test their receivers by connecting up and listening for whatever this FM signal is. I know on the Raspberry Pi Zero, you can put an MP3 file on the card, and it'll play that MP3 file over and over again. So it's there's a lot of excitement there. In terms of women in amateur radio, if you guys don't know, because I did not, I had been told the league had a big front porch with white rocking chairs on it, and there were a bunch of guys sitting out, on the front porch, rocking back and forth, ruminating about tube radios and AM. And I got up here, and I have to tell you, we have an absolute crackerjack staff of women that work for the league. And when you look at Becky, who basically innovated on the air, does the on the air podcast, when she's not available to do the podcast and we have somebody step in, people flip out. They're like, what happened to Becky? So, we have Kathleen, who's responsible for sales and marketing, our online store. We went through and did a full assortment plan on nearly 100 titles in the warehouse last week, which was a really interesting exercise in terms of focusing on what's important and also looking for white space in the assortment to say, where are we missing the boat? Where are we missing the mark? And one of the things that we decided is that we're going to expand the on the air brand into books. And we're going to create a whole series of entry-level books in these different categories, brand it on the air, and then link it back into the publication. So we can really move beginners, more quickly into the hobby. And, as far as I'm concerned, the most important thing is, and you'll see me say it in my columns, get radioactive, get on the air, make contacts, use the spectrum that we have and enjoy it.
All right, that was pretty interesting. That was actually more than you told me in the interview room. So if you had to be hired again, you'd be hired. Hey, I'm a big kidder, but that's good. What would you say is the league's most important member benefit and why? Pitch me the league membership.
So when I've been doing these interviews, I've kind of been stepping out a little bit and being a little bit rogue, but I think it's important sort of people know where I'm coming from. It occurs to me, I've been a league member for certainly most of my adult life. My dad got me a membership back when I was in high school. And, I never worried about the league. I never wondered about, all the different things that they did. I just trusted that they were good stewards of the hobby. And if I needed help, if I needed a book, if I needed a mentor, I have reached out to my section manager in the past. Again, this was a long time ago. But when I was looking to learn, and the league was always there. And it just seems to me that in recent years, the league has sort of been put on the defense about, what do you do for the money? What do you do for the money? And unfortunately, a lot of folks look at an ARRL membership and they see a magazine subscription and they think, oh, I don't like the way things are going, so I'm going to cancel my subscription. It's like, it's not a subscription. You get a magazine, okay? But there's a website with a wealth of information that's there, okay, which is great. But the thing, and I was alluding to this before, the thing that I think the league brings to amateur radio in ways that we don't acknowledge and we don't appreciate is that it brings structure. And what do I mean by structure? I mean, we have division. You've got a division director on the screen in front of you. We have section managers, right? 71 section managers that are managing different parts of the country. They've got staff that work for them basically as a volunteer to serve members in a lot of different ways. Affiliated clubs, the support that we give to affiliated clubs, and I can come back to that. But when I look at activities like Field Day, Field Day wouldn't exist if the league didn't keep after it. And it's not, we keep saying it's not a contest. It's not a contest. It really is not a contest. It's an opportunity for a group of people to come together as a community, set up something modest to something serious, And a lot of times the most important decisions are egg sandwiches or bagels for, you know, Sunday morning breakfast. And what are we doing Saturday night? What's going on the grill, right? Because you got to feed hungry operators. Every contester knows that. So, and so when I go beyond that into not just the operating events, but all of the other parts of the structure that we provide, it sort of moves over into the other area, which is the protection of the hobby. You know, we spend a small fortune on attorneys to look after our spectrum and any kind of, you know, FCC potential actions. You know, I found this $50 fee thing interesting. There was a whole part of the community, and it was not small, that said, you know what, $5 a year is a small tax to pay for a ham radio license. The way that we looked at it is, you know, we're sort of swimming in an ocean where there are guys that are literally paying billions of dollars for spectrum so that they can have things that you use, like the new 5G phones. Let me tell you what, those things are eating up spectrum. There you go. They're eating up spectrum. Well, if these guys have billions of dollars going to the FCC, you know, give the radio amateurs a pass. I mean, is $50 really going to be meaningful to the FCC? And the answer is no, it's not. It's a very, very small number in terms of the, you know, the bigness of that ocean that we swim in. And, you know, I could go on about the protection that we provide, you know, with our representation in Washington. But I do want to bring up an answer to a question, and it's not really a question. Again, it's sort of a criticism of ARRL. I've personally received a number of emails from people saying, why are you lazy guys sitting on your backsides and not responding to the FCC? Why do you wait until the very last minute? Well, I have to tell you, it turns out that it is 100% tactical and intentional. If you have a point of view that you want to file with the FCC, just about the worst thing that you could do would be to file it right out of the gate and let all of your enemies sit for weeks attacking your point of view. You know, the way that we look at it is our board members, people like Rhea, you know, collaborate on an email group and come up with their points of view. We harmonize all of that into a position. Our attorney in Washington writes it, and then at the last minute submits it to the FCC. And again, it's another form of protection, making sure that what we're doing is for the benefit of the hobby, and not allowing for people to, you know, take shots at the argument through the process. So in any event, to me, that's what ARRL means, is it brings structure to the hobby and protection. Those two things would not otherwise exist without the league and its members and its enormous network of volunteers.
Okay, so that's pretty good. So let me ask one final question, then I'm going to turn it over. How it's going to work afterwards, I'm going to turn it over to Ed or Nomar. I think I'll turn it to Ed, who can then, you know, ask the question, and then we could throw it to the audience. The last one is, you kind of touched on it, but what do you see, without giving away too much strategic information, what do you think will be our big advocacy? I'm not using the word legislative because it could be more than just legislation, right? What are our big advocacy priorities do you think will be in 2021 and beyond?
The one that amateurs nationwide are the most affected by, the one that we've had the most difficulty getting traction in, and the one that, yes, I can't speak to details, but we have a new strategy and approach to pursue, is what we're calling the Parity Act, or essentially looking at radio amateurs that are in environments like HOAs, where they're ability to erect an antenna is dramatically restricted or prohibited based on the HOA. Given the importance of radio amateurs to the country in times of need, what I would say to you is there are people who recognize that, they value that, and they want to make sure that regardless of where you are, radio amateurs can answer the call for help when needed. So that to me is the number one big question mark in advocacy, and it's the really tough work that we continue to do to try to get to a positive conclusion.
Right. Yeah. That plus, we have all the threats from 5G and all the other stuff. But all right. So let me pass it over. I think Ed unmuted. So Ed, Ed and I have been running a division survey. How it works is that we send out a battery of questions to my division membership, and then we are going to tabulate those answers, and I'm going to basically present that in my division report to the board in January. And they're very good questions. I mean, Ed is extremely good at getting the PR aspect. So I'm very lucky to have him on my team. So Ed, if you want to, ask a couple of questions and then maybe pass it over to the audience now. If you have any questions, you can drop them in the chat, and we could then queue you up to ask them to David, or we could ask David. So we have the chat here if you want to do it. I'll also be monitoring the chat on YouTube.
Yeah, I guess just, and David, welcome, okay, on behalf of the club, okay? We're really glad to have you. Welcome back.
Thank you.
Okay, and it's good to see our neighbor from Wayne so close and right in front of us here. So, yeah, I guess just in terms of Q&A, I mean, we have not rehearsed this. So maybe, obviously, if you can post your questions on chat, and maybe either Rhea and I can sort of be the arbiters, okay, just so that everybody gets squeezed in. And also, Rhea, I guess just, hang on, I guess, because this is also sort of a Hudson Division meeting as well, too. So any update that we want to do from a division standpoint, let's take a couple of minutes before we throw it open to Q&A.
Okay.
And handle that as well. But David, just one question, just, from the standpoint of, obviously, we're all going through all the pandemic and COVID and field day problems and everything else that we've had. But from the standpoint of just looking at, I guess my question is always membership and what what we're able to do, in terms of keeping members engaged in a very, very difficult time. We've been fortunate here at FLARC that we've held our membership numbers year over year, which is great. But I guess, what has the league seen in terms of just, overall input and sort of what's going on in terms of membership and interest? I would assume that there's a lot more, but, perhaps you can confirm that. Sure.
Well, membership has grown over the last year, which is good news. It has not grown a lot. It certainly has a lot more room to grow. And I challenge all of us members to get out there and find someone who's not a member and get them engaged. But, one of the things that we've done that I think is creative is we've been open-minded about let's call them the rules associated with some of the operating events, such as Field Day back in June, and then the ARRL DX contests coming up, where essentially we're trying to create accommodations. These are not permanent rule changes. Nobody needs to go to Newington and protest because, whatever, they're all excited about it. These are accommodations that are intended to do two things: get more people radioactive and increase the fun of participating in these events. And so that's really where our focus has been. Now, in terms of the league itself, I have to tell you, you guys have a lot to be proud of the folks that work here at headquarters, because through a pretty scary time, and you'll appreciate this being in Metro New York, and it certainly extended up into Central Connecticut. You know, the COVID numbers got very bad, very fast, and really, I think to a certain extent, almost became terrifying. You know, the league physically shut down for a week. Diane Middleton, who's our CFO and head of HR, I tease her and tell her she's our COVID czar. She has been absolutely extraordinary in working with management and staff to ensure that we can create an environment where people are able to work in the building safely and to be able to leverage working remotely, since we do have limitations on the number of people that are here in the building. So I think COVID's been very tough on the world, and I think that amateur radio and ARRL have responded well.
Okay. All right. Ed, do you have any more questions?
Yeah, no, just a reminder, just to, go back to, to the member survey here in the division, is that the link is on your Hudson Division bulletin. Okay. To be able to fill it out. If you don't have it or you've deleted it, I'll take the risk here and I'll send you a personal link. Okay. You can send me an email at wx2r@arrl.net, wx2r@arrl.net. And I'll send you a link to the survey for the Hudson Division. So, Rhea, let me toss it back to you.
All right. I got a question here from K2YRA. So he's asking here, let me pull it up. Yeah. The ARRL sponsors a great variety of events throughout the year, though I believe the year-long events such as National Parks in the Air and Grid Chase are very effective in engaging operators long-term, as well as increasing exposure of the hobby to the public despite pandemic restrictions at the current time. I encourage more of these long-term events tied to log to the world. Thank you. Okay, so this is more of a statement, but I will throw in something here with this. You mentioned the engagement of women, and National Parks in the Air was big because it tied in a lot of different hobbies. People go out and they explore it and stuff like that. I engage in some other hobbies. I fly drones. I'm a certified drone pilot. So I go out places and I shoot pictures with drones and video and stuff like that. And it gets me outside exploring. Do you think that the ARRL will do another type of event like National Parks in the Air? Maybe not exactly like it, but what do you think of that kind of idea?
Well, again, I don't want to give everything away.
Yeah, sure. You don't have to.
But what I will tell you is that you'll see in March and April, we are bringing a big spotlight to Cycle 25. We've been talking about this for a number of months, and we've been talking about specific operating events and awards that could be offered during Cycle 25. One of the things that we kicked around was something like a special DXCC for Cycle 25, but it takes 11 years, before you get your certificate. So that didn't work out. But in any event, we've been kicking around a lot of creative ideas. But again, we've got, and you've probably got there in Fairlawn, we've got technicians that have been licensed in the past couple of years that think that the FCC laid a dead band on them with 10 meters. And, it's really terrible. Well, you give this another year or two and 10 meters is going to be on fire, to the point where you get on some of these contests and the phone band is wrecked from 28.3 all the way up to 29. So if you're a technician and you think 10 meters is a dead allocation to you, wait till you see what Cycle 25 does. And it's shown early signs of much bigger life than what was forecast. So now there is a portion of the scientific community that thinks Cycle 25 is going to be huge. So this could be great.
I am on mute. Wow, playing Zoom bingo here. So Ed and Nomar, and of course anybody else, don't make this just our show. This is for you to talk direct to the CEO. K2AL asked any discussion of a novice type entry license. Before David answers that, Al from New Providence Amateur Radio Club. I think the real holdup with that is the FCC. But David, you could expand on that.
To the best of my knowledge, the FCC, from an administrative perspective, wanted to reduce the number of licenses, and there are people that want to come in as a novice. Frankly, I don't know how much easier you can make it. The technician license, there are people that literally cram for the exam in 24 hours. There's no code requirement, and they get their call sign. So I don't know that we actually need a novice level. I'll tell you, the toughest exam that I took, and I took my novice, general, advanced, and extra. I always thought the advanced exam was far and away the hardest exam. And the advanced licensees that wound up essentially, feeling that they were let down by the FCC and let down by the league and let down by the hobby. I mean, I understand where they're coming from. The only thing that I would encourage someone that feels like that is go get your extra, pick up the book. There's no 20 words per minute. You don't have to worry about that. Just, pick up the book and crush it.
Yeah. So Gordon Beatty, who is a very good technical resource in Northern New Jersey, and has always been sending me technical stuff. He has a generic question about youth and tech engagement. Gordon, if you're around and you want to unmute yourself and talk to David and ask him what you want to ask him.
Sure, David, thank you for doing this. And I'm amazed our paths haven't really crossed, especially since you know Bob Nauman. But it's a whole other conversation for another day. But so I spent a lot of years as a scoutmaster, and I basically, as part of our troops activities, got kids in Skywarn, got them in CERT before there was a teen CERT, got them on the air to use handy talkies, on our hikes because we were a hiking troop. Got them interested in HF, maybe a little bit of satellite here and there, and digital operations, and just general fascination. And what I saw was, in that 20 years as Scoutmaster, that kids would pick, a lot of careers that they wouldn't otherwise pick. A lot of them were more steadfast in why they wanted to become engineers and engineering related things. That's no surprise. But it was also very interesting as to how the ones who had either the military or first responder, services, police, fire, EMS, how seriously they took that communications lifeline as an essential tool, just like a law enforcement officer would look at other tools that they have, or a firefighter or an EMS person. They each have a set of primary tools. This was an essential tool, and they knew how to make it work. And you can see that now these guys are 25 and 30 and pushing 40 in some cases. So now, in all honesty, there are not many are on the air, but what I do see is that a lot of them are still licensed. And most of them have renewed their licenses. So I think they'll come around to the hobby more and more as they get more time. They're just settling their lives, right? Trying to get, families started, careers started, et cetera. So they're on that ebb side of the opportunity space. So what can we do to, plant that seed and continue to foster that seed across a lifetime, that will then hook them in when the time and opportunity space, maybe their own kids, show up?
Well, one of the things that I've noted is that we tend not to be, we tend to focus the conversation on the lack of youth. In fact, I saw a quote come up that said that people under 40 years old don't even know that amateur radio exists. I don't know that there's any fact to that, as much as it is sort of an opinion or a feeling. But what I will tell you is that the younger folks that come into the hobby are interested in a much different set of aspects of the hobby. So a perfect example is mesh networks. You know, if you look at Fairlawn Amateur Radio Club and you do a field day, do you make any effort to set up a mesh network at your field day, and how do you use it? You have a clubhouse I guess it's still in Fairlawn. I went to the old one that was, I think, a theater or something, and we were in the back corner there, right? But you know, you've got a building, you know, have you built a mesh network, and do you have people in the club that are doing that? Because young folks are absolutely interested in that. You know, I remember when, you know, it seems like every time anything is introduced from a technology perspective, it's the death of ham radio, right? So I remember when the internet came along and people were like, oh my God, it's going to be the death of ham radio. There's a whole new set of capabilities that exist today in amateur radio because of the internet. You know, one of the things that I've challenged our new director of MCOM in thinking about strategically is, you know, we're going to have Starlink up and running pretty soon. So if you take a group of people to a Caribbean island that's just taken a direct hit of a category 4 or 5 hurricane, and there's no buildings left, there's no power, there's no television, there's no radio stations, there's nothing on the island, and a group of hams get there, they set up a mesh network on the island, and then one of those becomes a gateway up to the internet through Starlink. Do we view that as a bad thing, or do we view that as a good thing? You know, our mission in being first responders and setting up communications doesn't change. But what does change is our ability at much higher bandwidth of communicating what's happening, you know, on the scene, boots on the ground, changes dramatically. But I said to him, you tell me, if you take a group of 24 guys, you're on an island, you're running around the island, setting up this mesh network at a bunch of Red Cross facilities, do you want to run a 20-meter wind link back to the US with health and welfare messages? Or do you want to have a Starlink, you know, dish that you set up at one of the locations, point it up at the sky, and bang, you've got high-speed internet driving your entire mesh network? Now, if you're a 20-year-old is going to say, well, of course you want to do that. But if you talk to somebody that's been in it for a long time and maybe has an emotional stake in WinLink, they may say, oh my God, that's going to be the death of WinLink. It's like, no, it's not going to be the death of WinLink. It's a very specific application. And are you willing to change your point of view? Up at the sky, and bang, you've got high-speed internet driving your entire mesh network. Now,
yeah, just a general reminder, if you're not talking, please be muted. Otherwise, unfortunately, if you unmute yourself, I'll remove you from the meeting and you just watch on the live stream.
Right.
So please remain muted until it's your turn to speak. Thank you. Go ahead, David.
So anyway, but the point is that when we, as the generation looking back, you know, for the youth that are behind us, we just need to be a lot more sensitive to the things that they may find interesting don't equate to what we're doing today. And
David, just FYI,
sure.
The club under Randy W2S's guidance has put up several different bands of Arden Mesh on the clubhouse, and
awesome.
There's a cluster of connected nodes scattered across Fairlawn. We're trying to make use of some of the local mountains to tie that together. And even though I'm in Florida, I'm still managing that effort remotely, which is kind of hilarious. But you hit a nail. You hit a very, very, poignant thing. The other thing you can do is you can make a T-hunt out of some old routers that have mesh software on them, and have people go find all the MAC addresses, and then just for good measure, take the GPS hack from where you find the target, and then have to communicate that back over a handy talkie, usually a Biaofeng or a FRS radio or whatever. And that we've done that as part of a transmitter, a multi-site transmitter hunt. And the kids love it because they can use their phones and they can fabricate a dish out of aluminum foil and sticks and rope.
Right. You know, the other thing is I'm in the process of writing a column for NCJ, the National Contest Journal, and it's sort of in the formulation stage. But the three pieces that I want to touch on in this article for NCJ has to do with evolution, revolution, and fair play. And when you look at the world today, most people have a tough time committing 48 hours to a contest. Now, are there diehards that are going to hang in there and do it? Well, of course there are, right? But if we want to get younger people that have very active lives, and you know, Gordon, you were pointing out, you know, people that are trying to raise a family, maybe they've got, you know, babies, whatever it is, they're, you know, how are we going to engage them in a contest? And we need to be able to create new ways of utilizing game theory to say, here's some interesting ways that you can have a contest within a contest that doesn't require 48 hours, but is incredibly competitive. And how do you go about doing that? Now, there's a contester, K9PG. I still don't know whether he's famous or notorious, but he's certainly a little bit of both. But, you know, one of the things that Paul has done in the past is he'll go into sweepstakes, and his mission is to work every section exactly once. He does not work any extra contacts, and you can't mess up, right? If you mess up, you've blown the whole thing. But it could be very interesting to create that contest within a contest, see how long it takes somebody to do it. So your score is actually based on time. And if you do mess up, you're not out of the running. Maybe you get penalized 15 minutes or something. But for us to take young folks and get them interested in something like contesting, where maybe they just don't have the time, we've got to be creative, we've got to be engaging and figure out ways to make it relevant for them, as opposed to clinging to these, you know, old definitions and beliefs of what contests are.
All right, so we got to move on. Thank you, Gordon. And somebody asked here, Steve K2YRA asked, Dave said FT8/FT4 is not the death of ham radio. Very hot topic. Interested in more of your perspective on that. Thanks.
Sure. So basically the argument is that because you're not using your brain to decode the messages, that it's not real ham radio. I can tell you that I've operated our station in Bonaire remotely, PJ4, and you'll see if you go back and look, there's PJ4/NA2AA. And I get a lot of requests from Asia to get on from there and work these guys. I went on at 1 o'clock in the morning, pointed the beam at the US, which happens to be the same beam heading for JA. I called CQ on FT8 and my entire screen went red. You know, and somebody criticized me, oh, you should be in Fox and Hound mode. I had no earthly idea that the entire band was going to become full of guys calling. And what's interesting is that if you've worked FT8 and you're trying to work a rare country, or you need a state to finish an award or something like that, you can't hear everything that the other station hears within the passband. And you've got to get creative and a little, let's just say you've got to show some tenacity to be able to make that contact. This is not something that's fully automated. You turn on the computer, you walk away and you leave it. Now, there are people that have created FT8 robots, And I will tell you that my experience is there's not many of them. The ones that do it are known, and they're not appreciated by the community, and they know that. So, you know, just because you can do something doesn't mean you should do something. So I don't view FT8 and FT4 as being the the proverbial death of ham radio. What I will tell you is when I hear of a guy like AA3B, who, if you go and take a look, I mean, this guy is a huge contester with FRC. He's a fantastic operator. He's a great guy. I think he posted maybe last winter that he had finally worked JA on 160 and he did it on FT8. So do I like begrudge him that he worked Japan? I think it was Japan on 160 because he used a digital mode like FT8 instead of RTTY. Oh, by the way, your brain doesn't decode RTTY. But RTTY apparently is not the death of ham radio, but FT8 is. So that's the way that I look at it is, you know, I said this the other night, it's a little bit like a Chinese buffet. You know, I kind of like everything on the buffet, but I'm certainly not going to be critical of somebody that that doesn't like something that I do, or vice versa. So,
Okay. Let me first ask Nomar if he's still around. Well, he should still be around.
FT8 instead of RTTY. Oh,
I'm
by the
here.
way, your brain doesn't decode RTTY.
K5ARN, if you keep unmuting yourself, you're going to be removed from the meeting. Thank you.
Uh-oh.
Yeah.
I'm here, Ria.
Yeah, Nomar. So how are we doing on time? How long you want us to run? We have, and before I queue up the next few questions.
Okay, why don't we're at 8:34 now. Why don't we look to say, I guess between David as well, I think around 8:45, right around in there, another
I
10
agree,
minutes or so,
because I've
if we
been
can
at
hold you.
this.
Yeah.
I've been at this all day and now into the evening, so I would have.
Okay,
I can
David-
appreciate it. Yeah, 10 minutes, one fall, 10 minutes, right?
David, I really appreciate it. Thank you very much. I cannot say this enough. Now, let me just briefly touch on this before we move off of this FTA question. What about those who make contacts without actually being there, i.e. letting the computer make contacts? What's being done to police such activity? Well, Fred and Judith, who asked that question, that's already been addressed in that, you know, there are few, they are known, and they're not well tolerated in the community. So that one's being taken care of. There are, one of them is kudos to the lab, W1RFI, and Paul, I don't know how to pronounce his name, Paul Cianciolo, the W1VLF, right, who helped me. Maybe those on conference should be aware of the support of the ARRL, AC2ZU. I do agree the lab, the Technical Information Service, is probably one of the best benefits that the ARRL offers. And actually, I learned fully about the TIS at a FLARC meeting, believe it or not. There was, oh, David, you could understand that. You could probably answer this one. Will the ARRL get involved in launching satellites in the future?
Well, let me tell you something. Okay, I am a staunch, outspoken. It's both proponent and critic at the same time. You know, we as a community, after AO40 exploded in space, you know, we have really sat back and focused on putting up LEOs. And it drove me nuts like no other to watch Elon Musk take a red sports car with an astronaut dummy and some David Bowie music and shoot that thing out into space at Mars. You know, we should have put an AO40 class satellite in the passenger seat and let him do a James Bond as he passed through where it needed to be delivered. You know, I don't think that the league has the resources to be able to do that. It's not necessarily what our mission is. It is the mission of AMSAT. You know, I've been an enthusiastic supporter of AMSAT for at least since the 1980s. When I first got into satellite, when it was operating RS 1011, and then 12, 13. So I don't know that we could ever do that, but I will tell you that there are organizations that are closely associated with amateur radio that if they decided that they wanted to commit the resources to putting up either a geostationary satellite over North America or a high Earth orbiting satellite for North American and South American radio amateurs, they certainly could. And I would love to see that.
Okay. The one more, and yeah, I'll ask you probably a couple more, but this is a real interesting one. I know we got a take from David Siddall. Maybe I could ask David if he'll join one of these meetings, but he might just say, well, he's a little too shy. What is your take on the departure of Chairman Ajit Pai? Now, I must tell you that Ajit Pai is very colorful on Twitter. I tweet at him and he tweets back at me sometimes, which is funny. You have to watch his Good Night Boys and Girls. He always posts something horrific before he goes to bed. What do you think about Ajit Pai's departure from the FCC?
Well, you know, I don't have a particular point of view on that other than, you know, I think he's someone who broadly supported amateur radio. And when things came to him, he was receptive in hearing about it. I don't know what the change in leadership there is going to mean for us at ARRL. And you know, we'll have to see how that goes.
All right. Well, Charlie NC3CRT, thank you, Laura, for letting David stay out late to play again.
That's right.
She's the boss. If the HF frequencies are important to amateur radio's future, maybe the ARRL should examine their continued promotion of modes that reduce HF, such as Echolink. Echolink has an average of 9,000 users on 24 hours a day. That's non-HF use. So I will say, I'll put my opinion, and then David could answer this. I don't think Echolink is putting a serious dent into HF at all, because Echolink serves a different type of user of an amateur radio spectrum. I find that on HF, I get on Echolink. I get on it for a specific reason, to get on nets and communicate with my friends in Trinidad. The reason I get on HF is to work DX, play in the contests, and meet my friends on HF. So I don't think that's really going to affect one or the other. So I don't think it's going to put a significant dent. And I do think that this sort of fusion between the internet and ham radio is not going to be detrimental toward the hobby. What do you say, David?
Well, I agree with you. And, you know, a personal experience that I had, again, was down on Bonaire. We had a group of Italian radio amateurs that came down to contest with us. And one of the guys opened his case and pulled out this little white box and plugged it in the wall and pulls out an HT and is sitting there rolling with laughter, talking to all these Italian guys back in Sicily. And when he got off, I said, what is that? And he said, well, it's a hotspot. And, you know, I use this little radio and, you know, rather than having to be by the repeater in Sicily, I just go through the internet. Yeah, again, it's one of those things where if somebody says to me, well, that's not real ham radio. Well, it was a real ham. He had a real radio in his hand and he was talking to his friends back in Sicily. Yeah, it may not have been through, you know, RF directly, but certainly everybody was using amateur radio to talk to each other. So I don't personally don't see why that's a problem.
Okay. All right. So it's getting on 8:42. Nomar or Ed, what do you want to do now?
Nomar, anything on your end there?
Not really, other than wishing everybody a happy holiday season and thanking them for being here and for providing us with, wow, a great attendance that we have not had, I would say, since we've been doing these Zoom meetings. So thank you very much to everybody and for being a part of this. And we hope it's not the last time.
All right.
Ed?
There is one late straggling question, but I guess we could answer it offline.
Okay.
Go ahead, Ed.
Yeah, David, on behalf of FLARC, welcome home. Okay, we're really glad that you were able to make the time to join us tonight. To all our guests tonight, welcome to FLARC, and join us again soon. Actually, our next Zoom meeting is on January 15th, where we're going to have Lauren Libby, W0LD, who's the CEO of Trans World Radio, speaking to us as part of our radio monitoring special interest group.
Who, by the way, is the largest consumer of electricity on the island of Bonaire.
That's correct. I've heard that. I've heard that. So
Well,
yes, we'll be paying part of the light bill, I would think. So
Yeah.
anyway, Rhea, thanks as well. Okay, for all your help and assistance. Obviously, this has been a really good show. And let me just back up Nomar to say happy holidays to everybody. And Rhea, I'll just leave it to you for the last word. 73s, everybody.
all right. Well, couple of announcements before I go. First of all, I'd like to thank David very, very much. I could tell you that this is a huge thing he's done for us because I know for a fact he is busy. Trust me when I say he is busy. He is. I don't know how he does it. I'm astonished, but I'm really glad that he took time out to come and talk to the membership. And I think it's important that he keeps talking to the membership. Feel free to email him, ceo@arrl.org, with your questions directly. And, be nice, but don't be afraid, right? You can also email me at N2RJ@arrl.org. You could find me on Twitter @Rhea Jairam. I'll put the links in here. And I'm also on Facebook, but although I'm kind of redoing my Facebook, but there is a Facebook @ARRL Hudson, where you can get the all the latest division stuff. If you're not an ARRL member, why don't you join? There's a lot of good benefits, and the league is only going to be growing from now. And if you are a member of the league, go in your member profile on the league website and subscribe to our emails. We don't send a lot of email, but I send out messages every now and again. And there's a lot of interesting stuff coming up. I'd also like to tell you, look on the Fair Lawn Amateur Radio Club YouTube channel. They have a lot of stuff going on. They archive all these talks. I'm going to be giving Tom a copy of this video to do an edited version of this talk, although the full live version will be up on the ARRL Hudson Division channel, youtube.com/ARRL Hudson. I post on my channel. You could look me up on YouTube as well. I try to post like twice a week, but anyway, happy holidays, be good, and 73 all. Thank you very much, FLARC.
Thanks.